Heya Cryptozens, it's 10 p.m. Pacific time. My name is Nikodemus, and welcome back to the Crypto Overnighter, where we take a nightly look at the crypto, NFT, and metaverse space. And keep in mind, nothing in this show should ever be considered financial advice. It's 10 p.m. Pacific on a Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. Let's take a look at the news. Alexei Pertsev. I tell you, I wouldn't want to be that guy. Of all the things I'm thankful for, not living in the Netherlands right now, that's one of them. Here's what I mean. Alexei Pertsev is a Russian national, and he is a developer living in the Netherlands who was arrested last August. He was arrested after the U.S. Treasury Department put TornadoCash protocol on their sanction list. The claim from Treasury officials was that TornadoCash was used to launder over $1 billion in stolen crypto, often by North Korean hackers. Martin Borlage is a public prosecutor in the Netherlands. So there was a meeting on Tuesday, and at that meeting, Borlage announced money laundering charges for the first time. She hadn't really said much about what was going on in the case, honestly, but we do know that she intends to pursue charges of facilitating money laundering by writing the TornadoCash code, which is just insane. TornadoCash is a tool, nothing more. Once you create a tool like this and release it, just like any form of knowledge, it is now beyond your control. Which was an argument that Borlage just wasn't hearing. Rather than acknowledging that TornadoCash is a DeFi protocol, she said that TornadoCash was the same as PepperSec. Now, PepperSec is a company that Pertsev had worked for in the past. Which, if you've even found your way to this show, you know that once a DeFi protocol is launched, once it's out there, it is definitely separate from whoever developed it. It's like a thought or an idea. Once you've released it into the world, you can't control it, you can't stop it. Keith Cheng is Pertsev's lawyer, and he was clearly disappointed with the judge's decision. He said, quote, "It's clear to us that these judges are not as familiar with the subject matter as they should be. At the moment, the case law regarding criminal activities is all about Bitcoin mixers. It's very important that the court understands that TornadoCash is something different." Now, from her side of things, Borlage explained things by citing laws that say you can't hide the origin and movement funds in the Netherlands. She said, quote, "If you peel everything off, what we have here is a fairly clear-cut money laundering case. That's exactly what a mixing service like TornadoCash does for you." She compared depositing money in TornadoCash with walking into a bank with a pile of 100 euro bills ready for deposit. She said, quote, "If you, as a bank, don't know where the money is coming from and haven't yet built in any mechanism to look at that, then there's a considerable likelihood that your service is laundering money." Which, okay, I can understand all that. Here's where things go badly. Because she's saying that Pertsev and his cohorts had control over TornadoCash. While that's true for the company, it's not true for the code. And she thinks that because it's a DAO, she calls the idea that Pertsev wasn't in control, she said it's fantasy. It's her claim that Pertsev and his fellow developers, Roman Senev and Roman Storm, she's claiming that they were in control because they could always outvote everyone else. Now, for his part, Pertsev suggested that if he were released, he would go back to work for PepperSec and would not work on TornadoCash at all. Well, Borlage shot that idea down, saying PepperSec is TornadoCash. Now, the guy says that he's ready to accept whatever restrictions on his movements if he's released on bail. Through a Russian interpreter, he said he just wants to go to church with his wife. Now, unfortunately for Pertsev, it looks like he's going to be stuck in jail for a while, at least until late February. That's his next hearing. Now, going from Dutch regulators to U.S. authorities, because the U.S. Senate has expressed some concern. They're always concerned, aren't they? In this case, 3 U.S. senators sent a letter on Monday. These senators, Dick Durbin, Elizabeth Warren, and Tina Moss, have done this before. See, they're not happy with Fidelity investments. They want Fidelity to reconsider allowing retail clients to buy Bitcoin for their retirement accounts. And now they're using the FUD from the FTX collapse as a justification for doing so. Thing is, this isn't the first time they've tried this. Back in July, the 3 senators also expressed their fears and concerns, as did the Department of Labor. This is in response to Fidelity announcing last April that they wanted to allow investors to put Bitcoin in their 401k accounts. Now, the thing is, retirement accounts is something that Fidelity knows a lot about. In 2020, they had $2.4 trillion in assets specifically in 401k accounts. This was 1/3 of the U.S. market at the time. So it's with that in mind that I kind of have to scoff at the idea of these politicians educating Fidelity Investments on how to manage retirement accounts. Yet, here we are. Their letter said, quote, "The ill-advised, deceptive, and potentially illegal actions of a few have a direct impact on the valuation of Bitcoin and other digital assets." Digital Currency Group's CEO Barry Silbert revealed to shareholders that they owe $575 million of their own money, because that money is owed to Genesis Trading. And while he acknowledged the fact, he said that the company would end up stronger at the end of this crypto winter. Now, this information comes to us from a Wall Street Journal. According to them, Silbert sent a letter to shareholders, and in that letter, he said that there are $575 million in intercompany loans due on May of next year. Now, it's his position that DCG did what any other crypto firm would do. They took out loans, quote, "structured on an arm's length basis and priced at prevailing market interest rates." But that isn't the extent of it. DCG also owes Genesis for a $1.1 billion promissory note, and they have a lot more runway on that one. It doesn't come due until June of 2032. And that loan was in response to the default of 3AC. Meanwhile, Genesis is looking for another $1 billion in funding to patch their hole in their budget. They tried and failed to secure that emergency loan from their investors. That led to Genesis halting withdrawals from their lending arm. On November 16th, they said, quote, "abnormal withdrawal requests have exceeded its current liquidity." So, DCG gave Genesis $140 million to keep going. Or did they? Because if DCG is having liquidity issues, and they claim that they're giving Genesis $140 million, did they actually? Or did they give Genesis another IOU, this time for $140 million? At any rate, Genesis is now looking for more capital, and there are reports that suggest if Genesis doesn't get that funding, they're going to file for bankruptcy. They said, quote, "Our goal is to resolve the current situation consensually without the need for any bankruptcy filing. Genesis continues to have constructive conversations with creditors." The Securities Exchange Commission takes a lot of heat from the crypto world, some of it from this show. However, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, too, can find itself on the unpleasant side of public opinion. And that appears to be happening again with this Ooki DAO case. That's the case where the CFTC sued in September. Allegations were that the DAO illegally offered crypto derivative products in the United States. This was after the CFTC made and dropped similar allegations against B0X, which was the predecessor to Ooki. Now, I don't know anyone who is specifically defending Ooki DAO. Most of the commentary on this seems to be centered on how the lawsuit was served. Specifically, the CFTC posted a notice on a forum and a chatbot, and then someone responded to the notice on the forum, so the CFTC is asking the judge to say that that's good enough to call it served. Well, people have issues with that. Filings published on Monday addressed the pushback from the CFTC on earlier amicus briefs filed, because all four of the original briefs called the CFTC's method of serving notice unlawful. Their argument was that the individuals in the DAO should have been served separately. The CFTC has asked the judge to approve of those service methods. This new round of filings say that the CFTC is trying to get around the process. They say they're trying to create a new precedent in favor of itself. In the meantime, CFTC's chair Rostin Benham has a date with the Senate, or at least the Senate Ag Committee, because they're having their own hearing on FTX. So that means Benham will be testifying in front of the Senate Ag Committee next week. It's kind of a tall order for that meeting because they're set to examine the, quote, lessons learned from the FTX collapse, which I hope there's a lot of lessons learned at that December 1st meeting. At this point, it's hard to tell what company officials, if any, will be at this meeting. However, it's not a conversation I think that Chair Benham is going to shy away from, because he's actually spoken recently about the fact that FTX derivatives program didn't go under, and he's claiming that it's his agency's regulatory practices that were responsible. Now, in the past, the CFTC was considering an FTX proposal that would see the exchange direct clearing derivatives. Now, serious enough that they sat down with SBF to let him make his case. Well, that's clearly off the table by now. And remember who's on that Ag Committee. It's led by Debbie Stabenow and John Boozman, and they're the ones behind the DCCPA, the Digital Commodities Consumer Protection Act. And the act was backed by Sam. This bill would see the CFTC taking over a large chunk of crypto regulation. Benham was actively supporting the bill. He testified in September in front of the Ag Committee on the subject. On the other hand, that bill drew criticism from the community over claims that it was a DeFi killer. Nevertheless, it seemed like the bill was going to sail through, largely because of the amount of time that SBF was spending as its champion. And now it remains to be seen what, if anything, will happen now that we're on the other side of the midterm elections. This meeting might give us an idea of the DCCPA's ultimate fate. Because if the political stink from Sam and from FTX is too great, I expect the DCCPA will be scrapped, rather than endanger a senator's chance of re-election because they were friendly with a liar and a thief. Recently, the court-appointed lawyers for the FTX case in the Bahamas filed their own Chapter 15 bankruptcy suit in New York. This was after Sam filed for bankruptcy protection on behalf of FTX trading in the state of Delaware. Well, that was ridiculous and has been corrected. The representatives for the Bahamas agreed to transfer the case to Delaware. So FTX filed in Delaware, and the Bahamas filed in New York. They said because FTX wasn't allowed to file for bankruptcy in the U.S. And so, while it's nice that that's all been cleared up, there's still an awful lot of money involved. And as much trouble as Sam and his cohorts might be in, it looks like the current crop of leadership at FTX is cooperating with the government and their investigators. This comes to us from a lawyer for FTX in the first bankruptcy hearing today. James Bromley is a partner at Sullivan & Cromwell. He's co-counsel defending FTX in the U.S. He said that they were in constant communication with the U.S. Justice Department. He also said they were in constant communication with the SEC and the CFTC. He continued saying that the company's leadership is cooperating with, quote, the U.S. government and the various regulators around the world who've taken a very keen interest in this situation. He said that there have been what he characterized as demands that John J. Ray appears in front of Congress next month. Cooperative, by the way, is a far cry from how FTX's lawyers characterized SBF's time at the helm of the exchange. They said that he ran the place like his personal fiefdom, pointing out that executives were allowed to use customer funds to purchase real estate. Bromley said, quote, you have witnessed probably one of the most abrupt and difficult collapses in the history of corporate America. Now, during that hearing, Bromley spent time talking about how the company fell apart in the span of a couple of weeks. He called the case an unprecedented manner, saying that the new CEO has assembled a team of investigators consisting of former SEC and CFTC officials as well as former prosecutors. He said that they've also hired Chainalysis to do a deep dive on the company's holdings. And you can see the wheels turning. FTX is going to sacrifice SBF and his executive team to save themselves. They're not going to protect him from the consequences of his own actions. Here's what I mean. Bromley described FTX at one point, valued at $32 billion. He called FTX the personal fiefdom of SBF. He told the court the business ran, quote, with a lack of corporate controls that none of us in the profession have ever seen. He said FTX spent around $300 million on real estate in the Bahamas, buying homes and vacation homes for members of the FTX team. And while he didn't mention SBF by name, Bromley said FTX, quote, was in the control of a small group of inexperienced and unsophisticated individuals, and unfortunately, the evidence seems to indicate that some or all of them are also compromised individuals. He added, a substantial amount of FTX's assets have either been stolen or are missing. And I think that's going to do it for us tonight. I want to thank you, my listeners, because when you stop listening, I will stop talking. We'll see you tomorrow night.